I'm getting ready to test a quilt block, which means starching my fabric, because you always want to starch your fabric before cutting pieces for quilting so that you will have better results. You're going to have better cuts, and you're also going to be able to sew more accurately when your fabric is stiffer. So I want to show you a couple very common and easy to find starches and starch alternative. Faultless is a brand you can find almost anywhere that sells starch. This is the one I've been using. This one is a little heavier finish than this one, so we're going to test both of those. And then this is Mary Ellen's Best Press. It's pretty easy to find. Lavender seems to be the most common and most popular scent. It also comes in other ones like lemon, Caribbean Beach, and more. These are just two options. There are many, many other brands. I'm just talking about these two because they're the easiest to find. First, let's talk about starch. Starch is basically a vegetable-based spray, and you're going to spray it onto your fabric. You let it sink in a little bit. You iron it with a dry iron because the goal is to dry the starch, not add more water, which is what steam is. And your fabric is going to become less supple, right? It's going to become a little bit more paper-like. The Best Press is a starch and sizing alternative. It's not made out of a vegetable product, so it's not going to attract bugs. Like apparently this one can attract bugs in certain climates, I believe, especially in the south of the United States. So this is a little bit different. Then I'm also going to show you how I took the liquid from this sprayer bottle and I put it into one of these mister bottles that I got off of Amazon. I use them for water. I also like how it spreads the Best Press better than this nozzle. So I'm going to show you that too. So I have both of these pieces of fabric. They're wrinkled and nice and supple. So I'm going to spray one with the starch. You want to shake it well, and you want to shake it with the lid on so nothing kind of sprays around. And then you're just going to coat that generously so it's nice and wet. Let that sink in. Now, I will also mention that I have a fabric down over top of my ironing surface. I don't want this to get filled with starch and everything else and get crusty. So I always put just a double folded piece of fabric over top of that when I'm starching, because you can see that will get wet. It will get nice and crispy too, but I can just take that off, throw it in the washer every once in a while when I feel like it. And my ironing surface still looks really good for when I'm using it without spraying starch. Now I'm going to take my dry iron and I'm just going to move it across the fabric until the starch dries. Now, when you are starching for quilting in particular, or really for anything, you want to starch your fabric before you cut it, because sometimes the shape will change a little bit. It might cause it to shrink a little bit. If you haven't pre-washed your fabric, it might twist a little bit. You can see I got this to stay in a very curved manner. It was a straight cut. It's a 2.5 inch strip of fabric, but when I did the gliding and I kind of slid this way, it went this way. This is why you would always want to starch before cutting, because if we assumed this was still 2.5 inches, nothing's going to turn out right. Now this one I'm just going to press or iron with no starch just to show you the difference in what it does with the fabric. You can see this one is still a lot more floppy. It's not wrinkled, but it's still a lot more floppy than this one. It has a lot more body and stiffness to it. So when I go to sew them together, it's going to be a lot easier to get starched fabrics to really stay where I want them and get a nice crisp seam. And let's try the heavy finish. So again, I'm going to shake that. Ooh, it's got a very different smell. I expected it to smell about the same, but it's a very different scent than this one. Another thing that can happen with traditional starch like this is if you put too much, when you dry it, you could end up with some white flakes on your fabric. You can see it almost looks like dandruff on the fabric, and that is the starch. So now let's compare. No starch, the gold starch, the blue starch. It is definitely a little bit firmer. Once you sew everything together, you can put these in the wash. The starch will come out. I would assume that that flakiness would come out as well. But now let's try the Best Press. I need this for my blocks. I'm going to use this. So I'm going to spray, and you can see it sprays quite thick and not super evenly from the mister bottle that this came with. And it has a very strong lavender scent. It's not as chemically as the Faultless, but I will say when I have used that on a lot of fabric, it gets overwhelmingly lavender in my sewing room. And it becomes a little bit too much. So if you're sensitive to smell, you might want to open the windows. You might want to try some of these if you have friends with some of these options, so you can decide what you like and don't like before you make a purchase. That is nice and pressed. I would say this is probably similar to this as far as what it does to the fabric. Now, if you want it even stiffer, you can put it on the back as well. And for that, I'm going to use this little mister bottle. And it just does a very fine mist. So when you want something really, really stiff, you can just put the sizing alternative or the starch on both sides of the fabric, use a dry iron and go over them to get them nice and stiff.